Okay, encourage members who are leaving the chamber to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible as we move on to the final item of business this evening, a members' business debate on motion 16304 in the name of Rachel Hamilton on tackling the rise in rural crime and equipment theft in Scotland. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons, and I invite Rachel Hamilton to open the debate. Around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased to be opening this debate on the rising threat of rural crime and its devastating impact on communities across Scotland. I'd like to thank my colleagues for listening in as well. This is not just a problem for farmers and those living in the countryside. It is an issue that affects the whole of Scotland, from the borders to the Highlands, from Aberdeenshire to Ayrshire, and even in urban areas where stolen equipment is often sold on or used for criminal activity. The figures are stark. According to NFU Mutual, the cost of rural crime in Scotland rose by 34.9% between 2022 and 2023, reaching a staggering £1.8 million. This is part of a wider UK trend, with the total cost of rural crime now sitting at £58.8 million. Behind these figures are real people, farmers, businesses, families. They're left counting the cost, not just financially, but emotionally and operationally as well. The nature of rural crime is changing. It's no longer just opportunistic theft. 91% of those surveyed by NFU Mutual believe that rural crime is becoming more organised and sophisticated. Criminal gangs are systemically targeting agricultural machinery, construction equipment, power tools and even GPS systems, which are vital for modern precision farming. These thefts do not just lead to financial losses, they disrupt work, they threaten food production and they undermine the safety and security of rural communities. So let me be clear, this is not just a rural issue. When a farmer in the borders has their tractor stolen, it could be sold on in Glasgow or used in further criminal activity elsewhere in Scotland or across the UK. When thieves strip GPS systems from farm machinery in Aberdeenshire, it affects food production that supplies all of our supermarkets. And this type of crime has a ripple effect right across the United Kingdom, impacting supply chains, businesses and consumers. So whilst other parts of the UK have taken decisive action to prevent equipment theft, the SNP government is lagging behind. The Equipment Theft Prevention Act 2023 passed with cross-party support in the UK Parliament. It introduced tighter regulations to prevent the theft and resale of machinery ranging from tools to tractors. This was a significant step forward, but more must be done to strengthen crime prevention efforts here in Scotland. We have effective tools at our disposal. The CSER scheme, for example, which uses unique markings and tracking devices, has been highly successful in deterring theft in England and Wales, yet uptake in Scotland remains lower. Other security measures, such as immobilisers, pin-protected GPS systems and mechanical deterrents, have also proven effective. We must ask, why are these protections not more widely encouraged and supported in Scotland? The Scottish Government has a clear opportunity to engage with industry experts, Police Scotland and the victims of these crimes to develop stronger preventative strategies. That means better policing resources, more rural patrols and tougher action against organised crime groups. Yes.
Bob Doris.
I thank the member for giving way. I appreciate that. I was surprised to hear that there's no clear, identifiable traceability for tractors, for example. I hadn't realised that. Do you think that's something that should happen in the UK as a matter of course, via the UK government or via local authorities? I would like to see the same thing for quad bikes, off-road vehicles and e-bikes, for example.
I thank Bob Doris for that intervention, and he's absolutely spot on. The Equipment Theft Act in the UK government covered three aspects. One was a comprehensive database where equipment would be registered. The second was forensic marking. And the third one, I'm trying to think, was immobilisers. So, that was what covered the Equipment Theft Bill. But I would like to go further in Scotland because I think there's much more that we can do. As I mentioned, the CSER scheme is very effective. But we know that farmers and rural businesses, construction businesses, are the backbone of Scotland's economy. They work hard every day to build houses, to provide food, to maintain our landscapes and drive economic growth. They deserve to feel safe, and they deserve the full support of this Parliament in tackling the rising threat of rural crime. Today, I call on the SNP to take this issue very seriously, to listen to those affected, to engage with industry experts and to take real action to prevent this type of crime from continuing to escalate. Scotland cannot afford to fall behind on rural security. I also want to thank the following people for coming to my rural roundtable: the National Rural Crime Unit, NFU Mutual, ABI, ATV Services and Durham University, and the Parliament very kindly allowed us to put a yellow JCB right in the front of the Parliament to demonstrate the CSER scheme. I look forward to hearing contributions, particularly from Rhoda Grant from Labour, because it is the Labour government who are holding this up for Scotland, because all they need to do, the Minister for Policing, which I have asked time and time again, Dame Diana Johnston, she needs to publish the consultation responses, move forward the regulations with secondary legislation, and then we can move forward here in the Parliament to support all the aforementioned people. We're a soft target here in Scotland, and I look forward to hearing contributions from others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Hamilton. We move to the open debate. I call first Tim Eagle, to be followed by Christine Graham. Around 4 minutes. Mr Eagle.
Well, thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I just remind everyone of my register of interest? I am a farmer myself. I congratulate my colleague Rachel Hamilton on securing what I think actually is quite an interesting and quite an important debate, and also for her ongoing work in developing the Equipment Theft Bill, which is akin to the Equipment Theft Prevention Act that passed in Westminster back in 2023. It is quite shocking, isn't it, when you look at Rachel Hamilton's motion, that the cost of rural crime in Scotland has increased by £400,000 between 2022 and 23, from 1.4 million to 1.8 million. That's a pretty staggering increase, and as well as costing our farmers more money, it is having a much wider impact on our rural communities. Now, Scottish Land and Estates note that the constant threat of rural crime and the impact it can have on farm business is a key driver of poorer levels of mental health in the rural sector. Not only that, we know that this increase in rural crime means that those on the front line of Scottish agriculture are now forced to make the decision of whether to spend more money on security measures and the associated increased costs of insurance, rather than investing elsewhere in the business. Whilst more work is needed to see where such instances of rural crime is more common than others, we know that more rural and sparsely populated areas are often easier targets for such crime, and the Highlands and Islands, the region I represent, is no exception to that. I commend the efforts of Police Scotland, and in particular those on the front line in rural communities, for their work in liaising with our farmers and crofters to prevent and investigating theft in what can often be difficult circumstances. However, it is worrying that rural crime and machine theft is becoming more organised, as is noted in NFU Mutual's most recent rural crime report. The report states that there is strong demand and value for used equipment across the world, and intelligence has revealed some crimes are being committed by well-organised crime groups with international links. Added to this, it is no secret that there are now fewer frontline police officers in Scotland now compared to when Police Scotland was created in 2013, and organised criminals know this. That is why more must be done to invest in rural policing, so that farmers have greater confidence that this growing problem can be tackled effectively. Now, I can't talk in this debate without talking about fly tipping. I was in my house not long ago at the end of what is a dead-end street, and I watched a van park up, and I didn't think anything of it, disappear 10 minutes later, and as I drove down to pick up my kids later that day, a massive pile of car waste and rubbish was sitting there. It is such a big problem in our industry, in our communities. We must tackle it. And I couldn't believe it. I went down with my tractor later on, picked it all up. 2 minutes later, I took it to the dump in Buckie, and I thought, this person has driven further to drop this stuff off near my house than it would have taken them to go to the dump that is open pretty much all the time in Buckie. It doesn't make sense. And I put that call out here and now that more people should just stop fly tipping. It makes no sense whatsoever. And can I just commend Rachel for, as I said, the work she is doing on the machinery theft bill. That really should already be in place, and we want to see that coming. GPS trackers are readily available. We should be putting that in on machinery. It's amazing when you look around your farmyard and you start calculating just what things are, even if they are old, just what the value there is, and that is all laying out. So let's put GPS trackers on them. And just finally, I had the pleasure of being at the Tariff Show a couple of years ago with Spark and Police Scotland, who are doing amazing work. The Scottish Partnership against Rural Crime, to tell farmers of all the options that are currently available to them. So please do go onto their website, have a look at that if there are farmers or anybody living rurally listening, and I hope that we'll just see Rachel's bill in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. Always full names. I now call Christine Graham to be followed by Douglas Ross. Around 4 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I too congratulate my colleague in the neighbouring constituency on securing this debate. And over the many years I've represented Midlothian, South Tweedale and Lauderdale, I'm well aware of the impact and incidence of what is termed rural crime, defined by the NFU, and I quote, "Any crime that occurs in a rural location or affects any person living, working or visiting a rural location," close quotes. So I thank the NFUS in particular for their briefing. Now, by sheer dint of population size, the volume of rural crime is, of course, lower than in urban locations. However, the knock-on effect within a rural community or environment often has a much deeper and far-reaching impact, both on the victim, victims and community as a whole. Now, I note that Police Scotland, in recording crime, I believe, does not categorise crimes as rural or urban. So, as a result, neither they nor the Scottish Government have data on, quotes, rural, close quotes, crimes, such as the theft of agricultural machinery, plant or fuel and timber. It's simply recorded under the wider category of theft. We therefore rely on the NFUS for the most recent figures referred to in the motion by other speakers, with the cost rising from £1.4 million in 2022 to £1.8 million in 2023, and the claims rising 22% for machinery theft, often to order. 1.1 million, quad bikes 363,000, GPS 363,000, because farms are seen as easy targets and for obvious reasons it's difficult to self-police. So the measures... Yes, I will.
Jamie Halker-Johnson.
I thank the member for taking intervention, and I declare an interest as a partner in a farming business. The member talks about the costs, but there's also the cost of delays to actually undertaking work. There is the impact if you've lost a quad bike, and obviously making the job harder. All of these things, just going through insurance, these are also huge costs on both financial but also on farmers' time as well.
Christine Graham, and I can give you the time back.
Thank you. I absolutely concur with what you've said. That's strange for us both, isn't it? Anyway, we have the Scottish Borders Partnership Against Rural Crime. And that brings together key organisations working together to tackle that crime, in particular the increasing threat posed by serious organised crime groups operating most often to order. You can't put a tractor or combine harvester up for sale on eBay. You've stolen it knowing exactly where you're going to sell it. This partnership includes, as you would expect, Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue, NFUS, Scottish Land and Estates, SEPA, the River Tweed Association and the SSPCA, all working together to prevent and combat rural crime. But there are some measures the farming community and beyond can do to help. So if you see something suspicious, out of the ordinary and out of place, you can, if intervention is needed, immediately phone 999, otherwise the 101 number, or report anonymously through Crime Stoppers or even on Police Scotland website. But do not put yourself at risk by confronting intruders, no matter how angry and compelled you feel, because these are really, really serious criminals. You can put measures in place to deter and prevent marking, tracking and securing of farm machinery and tools, including in the highest impacted areas, and surely that must help reduce insurance premiums if you've taken these measures. Indeed, many years ago I suggested to Police Scotland have a stall at the border shows where discreetly farmers could report their concerns, particularly about the theft of livestock, because they often felt guilty. They shouldn't, but they often felt guilty that somehow these could have been prevented and they weren't protecting their livestock. But they have to remember, these criminals are well organised. They've scoped out their targets, have the delivery all in hand, even shipping abroad. So it's very difficult. It's not casual these days. But so, for the Scottish Government, can I ask, would it not be helpful if Police Scotland categorised rural crime as I've earlier defined, thus providing invaluable data to help detect and deter? Unless we get lost in figures and data, each and every rural theft is personal, distressing to the victim and victims, and must make them also feel very insecure in their remote settings. Let us not forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. I now call Douglas Ross to be followed by Rhoda Grant. Around 4 minutes, Mr Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I also congratulate Rachel Hamilton for tonight's debate and the excellent work she's done both locally and nationally on the potential bill that we could hopefully see passed through this Parliament. Could I also refer members to my declaration of interest? My wife is a police sergeant with Police Scotland, and I say that because I will be mentioning policing as Tim Eagle did. One of the issues we have in more remote and rural areas is the availability of police resources, and Christine Graham was right to outline what people should do when they see a crime, either phoning 101 or 999. But it reminded me of something I was told just a couple of weeks ago. I was at a family funeral up in Argyll, and someone had witnessed a theft out in a forestry, very remote area, but the theft was currently ongoing. So they phoned the police. Now, this is up in the Highlands, but the nearest available unit was up in Wick. So they were going to be well over an hour away before they got to this situation. And that is a problem that criminals are taking advantage of, that they know the response from police will very often be quite slow, if they even come at all, because their resources are very stretched. I think it's also right to mention Tim Eagle highlighted the cost of machinery, and that is something that farmers know very well. But again, Christine Graham was right to speak about the cost of livestock. Some of the livestock on our crofts and farms across Scotland are extremely high value. If we speak about tups that we see being sold at the sales, some cattle, even sheepdogs, and we've seen sheepdog thefts across Scotland. These are highly trained dogs. A lot has been invested in them, and they are also being stolen as well as machinery. In preparation for... I'll happily take an intervention.
It's really an intervention, a comment on the theft of sheep, because it's happened in a farm in my constituency where it was obviously a shepherd that had stolen the sheep and taken them down the old Drovers Road because it was in the middle of nowhere, and the farmer didn't find that out till months later because it was the time of the year that he'd lost so many sheep.
Douglas Ross.
And it's very difficult. Those of you who watch, as I do, this farming life and such like, I mean, these sheep are often in thousands of acres of hill, and it can only be at one point of the year that you recognise there has been a theft, and then it's too late to get evidence to prosecute someone. And it's sad as well, but it is a reality that some of these thefts, and they are a minority, are perpetrated by fellow farmers, and that's something that we have to accept and hopefully see minimised and ultimately eradicated. But I was saying that I spoke with my local Chief Inspector, Mike Mackenzie, who's Chief Inspector for Murray, based out of Elgin, about rural crime in our area of my Highlands and Islands region. And he gave me a good overview of what's happening at the moment. He spoke about the North East Partners Against Rural Crime Group. Now, this is a group that is chaired by Police Scotland, and it just so happens that Chief Inspector Mike Mackenzie is the chair at the moment. But it brings in a lot of other bodies, such as the National Farmers Union, Scottish Water, Scottish Land and Estates, local authorities, to name just a few. And they are working together to support rural communities through both prevention and education. And I think that's really important, that they do educate what the resources they have available to support and protect farmers from theft, and to encourage farmers to take this up. He spoke about a group in Banff who spoke to the NFU group in Banff about economic crime and fraud against farmers. So farmers are getting more information from them. And he also told me about the campaigns that are being promoted at the moment. One which will be promoted at the Royal Spring Show shortly is the Police Stop Me campaign. And this will be vehicles that have the sign saying Police Stop Me, that encourages police to stop these vehicles in certain hours of the day when you wouldn't naturally expect them to be doing farming activities, and it may be that they are currently at that time being driven by someone who's stolen them. So these campaigns, I think, are very useful, very important, and Chief Inspector Mackenzie offered me the opportunity to meet with our rural crime reduction team in Murray to hear further about their plans, and that's certainly something after tonight's debate and the work that Rachel Hamilton has done I will be taking forward, and I hope to hear from the Minister tonight positive comments about what we can do to tackle this issue, one of which is to support the proposals from Rachel Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Ross. I now call Rhoda Grant to be followed by Finlay Carson. Around 4 minutes. minutes. Ms Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I also want to thank Rachel Hamilton for securing this debate and hosting the drop-in with NFU Mutual and the National Rural Crime Unit. And that highlighted the issue of theft of equipment with incidences and indeed costs increasing. And while insurance quite often pays for these thefts, the cost of insurance is borne by everybody who holds a policy. So it's not a victimless crime, and it adds to the cost of farming businesses. And as others have mentioned, the personal impact can be enormous. The cost of rural crime has increased by 35%. And others have mentioned the Equipment Theft Prevention Act of 2023. And it would be good to hear from the Minister whether, while she's summing up, whether the Scottish Government have looked at legislation, maybe looking at bringing forward something similar here, or if there are ways that the Scottish Government can help incentivise the installation of anti-theft and tracking devices, which I think would be very useful for those who have large, expensive pieces of equipment. But the increase in rural crime is happening at a time when rural police numbers are falling. And I raised concerns previously about island policing with the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, and that was some time ago. There was a situation on Uist and Eriskay where there were no police on duty when a serious incident had to be dealt with. And it was off-duty officers that had to come in and deal with that. They had to hold a prisoner overnight, and they had to work overnight, working hours that they shouldn't have been working, whether while they were on duty, far less while they were off duty. So working extremely long hours and no police in cover at all. And sadly, those who commit crimes in rural areas know that this is the case for policing throughout rural Scotland. And while islanders have some protection against equipment theft, because thieves need to get the equipment off island undetected, and that's quite difficult to do if you're sitting in a ferry queue, they don't have the protection against other forms of crime. For example, things like bank closures have added to rural crime. Since 2015, there have been a 60% decline in bank branches, and the brunt of those closures are in rural Scotland. In the Highlands and Islands, there's been a huge loss. For example, Caithness and Sutherland have seen a 72% decline, Murray a 66% decline, Rossskye and Lochaber a 65% decline. And criminals know that cash-based businesses will be holding much more cash if there's not a local branch for them to deposit it in. So we know these businesses are being targeted, and those criminals know where to look. And the lack of police means that there are more break-ins as well, and thefts of property, and also theft of animals, as others have mentioned. And while tagging and traceability makes it difficult to sell stolen animals on the open market, there's many outlets for cheap meat where no questions are being asked about where it came from. And I read recently that it's estimated that this has led to £2.7 million of losses to farmers in 2023. But there's also ramifications for food safety, because people are obviously buying this without looking at the traceability. So, Presiding Officer, we need to ensure that there's not an urban-rural divide with regard to fighting crime. We need to ensure rural areas are adequately policed and equipment to deal with, and policed with the equipment as well to deal with specifically rural crime. And I hope this debate highlights these issues, and look forward to the Minister's response.
Thank you, Ms Grant. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, Finlay Carson, around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Crime in any form is abhorrent and distressing, especially for the victim, whether an individual, a family or a business. And I must comment and touch on Christian Graham's comments about a lot of the crimes in rural areas are committed where people are on their own, or at the end of long farm roads where the police response can often be miles and miles away, or even neighbours are far away. And the police response in rural areas is often far too similar to what we see in urban areas. I've myself have reported strange vehicles at the end of the road on which I live, which is quite remote. And the response you get from the 101 number is less than helpful. A strange car at the end of a street in Glasgow is not the same as a strange car at the bottom of a rural driveway, and we need to appreciate that there are those differences that Rhoda Stewart Rhoda Grant touched on there. But sadly, in today's current climate of the sharp rise in inflation, it's becoming all too attractive for individuals and organisations and organised gangs to turn to crime in order to make a fast and easy profit. Regrettably, as we've heard, rural crime in Scotland has witnessed a meteoric increase with an increase of 35%, and it now costs the UK more than £53 million, with farm equipment and machinery thefts providing a hugely attractive target for thieves. Which is why today's members' debate brought to the Chamber by my Scottish Conservative colleague Rachel Hamilton is of vital importance, and I thank her for doing so. I wholeheartedly support her call for legislation in Scotland to tackle agricultural machinery and vehicle thefts, as it's becoming abundantly clear that tougher measures are needed if we're to break this vicious cycle. In my own constituency, Gallien Western Fries, we've witnessed a number of thefts, possibly down to the fact that the ports at Cairnryan make it easier for criminals to get equipment out of the country to destinations across Europe. Indeed, I recently met Superintendent Andrew Huddleston from the National Rural Crimes Unit, and he told me that Russia was now becoming one of the favoured haunts for black market agricultural vehicles, either to be used as spares or even to work on the land because of the trade restrictions that are in place. He also mentioned that criminals are becoming more sophisticated and organised, and thieves have been known to target several farms in one night in one area, using GPS to locate high-value equipment such as tractors and combine harvesters. So it's worth mentioning that the cost of GPS theft has also escalated sharply to more than £500,000. This GPS is sophisticated equipment which is used to guide farm vehicles as they plough or seed, and they typically cost over £10,000. But as we've heard, apart from the obvious financial loss, it provides farmers with additional headache of facing delays and disruption to subsequent harvesting and cultivation work. So it's clear that robust action is needed to assist the farming fraternity in any way, given that they don't exactly have their problems to seek at the moment, and will not even touch on the inheritance tax plans tonight. But according to the general rule of thumb used by thieves and criminal gangs, if it's not securely bolted down, they're simply there for the taking. Rural property has also been targeted, with even the lead on roofs up for grabs, while bicycles, quad bikes and all-terrain vehicles are proving to be very high on the hit list. In a bid to counter the rise in crime in Scotland, the Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime, as we've heard, SPARC, has been set up to prevent and tackle rural crime, particularly the increasing threat posed by serious organised crime gangs throughout Scotland. The multi-agency intends to be more visible and understanding the local and national concerns. But in conclusion, Deputy Presiding Officer, I would like to thank all the parties around the Chamber, and I believe they will support Rachel Hamilton's proposed bill that aims to prevent both the theft and resale of stolen equipment and machinery in Scotland.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call on Siobhan Brown to respond to the debate. Minister, around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I am really grateful for Rachel Hamilton for bringing this debate and giving me an opportunity to respond. Rural crime, such as the kinds that's been outlined this evening by members and by the member in her motion raised in the Chamber, is a very serious issue. It can have hugely detrimental effects on communities, businesses and individuals. And, Presiding Officer, our farms are the lifeblood of our communities. These businesses, some of which have existed for hundreds of years, should not have to put up with this kind of crime, almost exclusively perpetrated by organised crime groups seeking high-value items that can be resold to fund other activities.
We've rightly spent some time discussing the theft of farm machinery, and I'd like to spend a few moments talking about the work that the Scottish Government and our partners are doing. But if I could just address some of the members' contributions before I get into that, if I may. Just in relation to Rachel Hamilton and Rhoda Grant raising the Equipment Theft Prevention Act 2023, I just think it would be helpful just to give you a bit of insight from where we are as a Scottish Government, because I know that it was a private member's bill which received government and cross-party support down south, and it had the royal assent on the 20th of July 2023 and commenced in January last year. And it prohibits the sale of prescribed equipment without an immobiliser or a unique identifier. Scottish Government officials weren't aware about this bill, maybe it was because it was a member's bill, until we were approached by Police Scotland in late May 2023. So when we found out about it, there was insufficient time to fully consider the implications of the bill for Scotland, given where the bill was at the time through its passage through Westminster. So at the moment, there are no immediate plans to replicate the Equipment Theft Prevention Act 2023 in Scotland. But in the meantime, the Scottish Government is awaiting further information on the impact of the Act in England and Wales, which could influence future decisions. And I do know that Rachel Hamilton did say in her motion, she mentioned several initiatives that are working well, and I'm always happy to meet with the member and stakeholders to discuss how we can improve things with rural crime. Sure.
Rachel Hamilton.
The Minister for taking the intervention. In past question and answer sessions here in the Chamber, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Angela Constance, has very much welcomed this and said that the Scottish Government were working with the Home Office. And that is exactly the point I made to Rhoda Grant, that Labour, all they need to do is publish the consultation responses and take forward secondary legislation with the regulations, and then they can enact the intention of the bill. I think it's a really simple thing for the Scottish Government to do. I think that because there's that cross-border movement, that we really need to consider it, because farmers move their equipment, but also criminals move equipment, and I don't want farmers to be left behind. I think it's really important that we replicate this in Scotland.
Minister, I can give you the time
Yes,
back.
I thank Rachel Hamilton for those comments. I'm not aware specifically of what the Cabinet Secretary has commented on, but I'm happy to raise this with her, and if it's worthwhile, maybe sending a letter to the UK Government, I'm sure she'll be happy to do that as well. If I could also just mention a few other Christine Graham's contributions, and Police Scotland to categorise the difference between urban and rural crimes for data. I think that is a very valid point. Obviously, Christine Graham will know that it is an operational matter for Police Scotland, but I am very happy to raise this to see if the Police Scotland have any concerns or any work progressing in this area. And I think Douglas Ross, in his contribution, he highlighted the importance of good partnership. Yes, yes.
Christine Graham.
I appreciate, of course, it's a matter of Police Scotland, but I did mention that when I was addressing the point. But I'm sure insurers could help, because they will know what they're insuring and whether it's rural theft or urban theft. So I think they should start with the insurers.
Minister.
Okay, thank you, and I thank Christine Graham for that point and highlighting that, and it's valid. Douglas Ross highlighted important issues about good partnership working. And I think this is really important. Having antisocial behaviour underneath my remit, I'm acutely
Minister,
aware...
could I encourage you to speak into the microphone?
I'm acutely aware of how important it is to have partnership working with local authorities, local police, lots of different stakeholders to really... I think it's important because they're the ones that know the area the best. So I think that you've highlighted some really important work that is going on in your constituency as well. If I could move on to just some work the Scottish Government and the partners are doing to prevent this kind of crime and mitigate its impact. Disrupting organised crime and diverting individuals away from organised crime remains a priority for the Scottish Government and partners on the Serious Organised Crime Task Force. However, in a rural setting, much of the work aimed at preventing organised crime is done through the work of the Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime, which has been mentioned several times this evening already. The Scottish Government continues to work with the partners across the Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime, also known as SPARC, and through the continued expansion of the local partnerships against crime. across Scotland, with this sort of theft a priority for the group. The Rural Crime Strategy 2022 to 2025 was launched on the 24th of June 2022 and involved all members of Spark in its drafting. The strategy adopts a holistic approach and aims to, among with other things, ensure its members are alert and understand local and national concerns relating to rural and environmental crime, and promote and improve rural community and environmental well-being where people can flourish and feel safe. The strategy sets out 7 rural crime priorities, each with their own action plan, and these include the theft of agricultural and forestry machinery, plant and quad bikes and all-terrain vehicles. And, Presiding Officer, it is only by working in partnership, as I've alluded to earlier in my speech, that we can hope to tackle this menace. Spark and the local partnerships recognise the crucial role of working together towards a common goal. And to do this effectively, they share intelligence on organised crime groups operating across borders, providing specific information to the rural and farming community on how best to secure and prevent theft of this equipment, as well as other crimes noted in the strategy. They also demonstrate crime prevention measures. Yes?
Douglas Lumsden.
I thank the Minister for taking an intervention. We heard from Tim Eagle earlier about fly tipping. So can I ask, is fly tipping one of the priorities that was listed, and what actions has the Scottish Government taken to try and reduce fly tipping in rural areas?
Minister.
Yes, thank you. There are 7 areas, and I did have it written down, and fly tipping is one of those, so it is one of the priorities for that strategy. They also demonstrate crime prevention measures in relation to marking, tracking and securing of farm machinery and tools, including in the highest impacted areas. I fully appreciate that this is a kind of theft that is a significant concern to our rural communities, and can have serious consequences for the agricultural sector in terms of cost and confidence. However, there are some positive strides forward, both in terms of number of crimes reported and the associated cost of this crime on rural communities. Police Scotland's recent update on the work of Spark highlights that in January 2025 there were a total of 69 rural crime incidents reported, which is a decrease in the number of reported incidents across Scotland. It's small, but it's 9 less reported crimes and offences incidents compared to the same period in January 2024 last year, where there was 78. But where we do see a bit of a difference in the reduction of this crime is the total cost of rural crime. In January 2025 was 188,250, although 44,400 was recovered this year. And this is a decrease in monetary value of rural crime for the same period of last year. So in January last year, there was a reported rural crime figure of 221,675, but at that stage there was only a recovered total of 16,500. So I hope members can see that it's small, but there has been a positive step in the last year. Indeed, the method of working with the Spark model has proved successful, that Police Scotland are using it as a template for the Scottish Partnership Against Acquisitive Crime, also known as SPACE, which was created around 18 months ago to bring a partnership approach to preventing a number of forms of theft and fraud, and is at the forefront of the efforts to tackle retail crime, which members have heard me talk about in the chamber previously. In terms of our support for Police Scotland more broadly, in 2025 to 2026, the Scottish Government will increase police funding to £1.62 billion to support police capacity and capability. And we're also providing £57 million in additional resource funding, an increase of 4% compared to the 24-25 published budget. This will support frontline service delivery and allow Police Scotland to make progress with key areas of transformation as outlined in their 3-year business plan, which includes a strong commitment to delivering the best service for communities around Scotland, including rural areas. Presiding Officer, I've made it clear to the Chamber that sometimes the devastating impact of this type of crime can have have on our farming and rural communities. I hope that the information I have provided today gives members some assurances that the Scottish Government will not be complacent, and we will continue to work with Police Scotland and other partners to develop and implement strategies to combat those perpetrating these crimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting of Parliament.